Hello friends, this is Adam with Movie Guy 365, and in today's video, I'm going to go over some fantasy movies you definitely need to own on 4K. When it comes to the many genres of films, I think for me personally, growing up, both in equal parts science fiction and fantasy had a direct influence and gave me my most creative inspiration. And it really, I think it was those movies that made me just love film in general. And of course, you have many others like Westerns and action, adventure, romance. There's so many out there. But for me, fantasy, I think really just gave me a lot of who I am as a person going forward and, where my creativity lie. So I thought I would go over some movies that were in the fantasy genre that are on 4K that you should definitely own. When you think of fantasy, there are many things that spring to mind. Magic, swords and sorcery, Dungeons and Dragons. There's a lot that can fit into that category. So for this particular list, I'm going to try to stay within those confines. So I'm not really going to dive into any sci-fi or something that may be like 90% comedy and a little bit of fantasy. But really, I think there's more than enough that is in that basic description of the genre that are on 4K that you really, I think, would need to check out. They have some great picture, audio. Of course, many of these titles that I'm about to mention have gotten audio upgrades. And of course, one of the big selling points for 4K is the inclusion of HDR and Dolby Vision. So going over this particular list, it's not in any real particular order. It's just a bunch of movies that I think you would really enjoy and you should check out on 4K. And also, if you're interested in any of the titles I mentioned in this video, I will put direct Amazon links in the comments section below. All right, so let's not waste any time. Let's get started. To begin, I want to go with, in my opinion, the defining fantasy movie of my generation, and Peter Jackson's The Lord of the Rings, and yes, the Hobbit trilogies on 4K are absolute must-owns. Now, the achievement alone in at least the Lord of the Rings trilogy is nothing short of just amazing to me. These are perfect movies. Once again, my opinion, but I think the 4K editions are something you should definitely own for yourself. I know there's been some divisive opinions back and forth about it. I personally think that they're well worth the upgrade, and I'm just more than happy with the results here. And these trilogies are just great. You can just start from The Lord of the Rings and then move into The Hobbit, but if you watch them on 4K, they're going to have more of a unison visual style. I know, once again, those changes were a little bit controversial, but I think really, as far as fantasy goes, these trilogies are must-own on 4K, and something that, I can't imagine. I don't think I've ever really talked to anybody that loves films that hasn't seen these, but if you've never seen the Lord of the Rings trilogy or haven't upgraded to 4K, I highly recommend you do so. Another element a lot of people think of when they hear fantasy is dragons. And I still maintain that we are woefully underrepresented with dragon-centered films, but the ones that we do have, more or less, are really solid. So for starters, Shout Factory recently put out a 4K edition of Dragonheart. I think the film is fine. It's an action adventure, and it's a lot of great fantasy. Of course, you have Sean Connery as Draco, and I think Shout Factory did a really good job with the 4K. I only wish they would have upgraded the audio on this one, but visually, it's a nice bump. And if you want to go for a little bit more recent flair, I actually really enjoyed this one, Dungeons and Dragons, Honor Among Thieves. I am just a lifelong Dungeons and Dragons fan when it comes to the books. I've actually never played a board game, but I thought the movie was good, and I think it really looks great on 4K. And of course, you get all that modern audio, and it really does a good job. I think it's a really nice visual and audio experience. And lastly, Dragon Slayer. The 4K edition is fantastic. In my opinion, one of the best dragon movies out there. And normally when you hear Paramount and 4K catalog, you get a little bit nervous, but not for this film. They did a great job. The visual upgrade is more than worth the price of admission. And also you get a nice Atmos upgrade. It adds a lot more to the sound experience. I love all these dragon movies. They're really good. And there's some fun, elements to be had when it comes to these type of films. So yes, I highly recommend also you check out all three of these. When it comes to animation or stop motion animation, I do feel that they handle a lot of fantasy genre type of movies, I think a little bit more consistently. And one of my personal favorites, Coraline, absolutely is something you should check out. I mean, the whole plot with the other mother and the realm that the other mother lives in, that she tries to lure Coraline into, it is fantasy through and through, and the 4K edition is well worth the upgrade. You get that nice visual pop with the HDR and Dolby Vision, but really the Dolby Atmos is the winner here because it sounds great. It makes the old track just sound not too good in my opinion, but really, I mean, this film is great from start to finish. It's got some mystery to it. It's a thriller, but at its heart, it is a fantasy film, and there's a lot to enjoy in that genre. I really like it. I think a 4K should be on everybody's upgrade list, and definitely check this one out for yourself. Back in the 80s, you really got some solid fantasy films. I mean, I could do a whole list just on 80s fantasy movies. And also, of course, you have Jim Henson and his Creature Workshop putting out two, I would say, pop culture significant films in The Dark Crystal and Labyrinth. I mean, both of these movies thematically are not too far away from each other, but the dark fantasy elements in each is really something I think they don't make today. I mean, of course, you have Henson's creatures being an important part here, but I mean, I think the movies themselves need to be seen more. And what better way to do so than with the 4K discs? I think The Dark Crystal and Labyrinth, both released by Sony, are solid 4K upgrades. There's some great stuff to be had here. I don't think there was any real problems with the visual upgrades. I think they're really done well. And of course, audio-wise, they both sound great. They both sound really good. In my opinion, both films really need to be upgraded from the Blu-ray. And I think if you are at least curious about these movies, give them a shot. And what better way to watch it for the first time than with a 4K pickup? This next one was released last year, and it made my top 10 of best 4K disc list. And it was very unsuspecting because, I don't know, going into this movie, I'm not sure what to expect, but it's a romance, but it is a fantasy from start to finish. 3,000 Years of Longing. Not a lot of people know about this film, but I do recommend this one very highly. And if you're a 4K collector, this one you're getting is going to just demo your whole system because it's got a visual picture that is stunning, and the audio, it's room shaking. It's got some great elements, and I don't want to spoil the story, but let's just say, once again, it's a love story, and it involves a genie, and there's a lot of fantastical elements in the movie. And I think it just is something you should check out. If you like a good modern fantasy film, I highly recommend 3,000 Years of Longing. It's great. Tilda Swinton, Idris Elba, both fantastic in it, but the 4K is certainly the way to go. If you're a longtime viewer of my channel, you know how much I think classic cinema and 4K go hand in hand. They often get the best upgrade possible in this format, more than any other. And let's go back to one of the original fantasy films. The Wizard of Oz on 4K is a stunner. This movie, I mean, I don't need to sell you on the film. I mean, the movie itself is iconic. It's classic. It's got a pop culture relevance that will be timeless. But the 4K edition is certainly worth picking up. I mean, the colors in Oz just pop off the screen. The HDR in this is phenomenal. And audio-wise, it's good. I believe it does use the same audio track from before, but I think really the visual enhancement is more than enough. Once again, The Wizard of Oz is classic cinema. It's fantasy at its best, and it's something you absolutely should own. Within the fantasy genre, of course, you have a little subgenres here and there, and another one that I feel is woefully underrepresented today, but back in the 80s, it was a little bit more prevalent with movies like Conan, which I'm hoping one day we'll get a 4K edition of that. That would be great. But a little bit more modern, I would say, and I say modern, I would say late 90s, early 2000s, is The Scorpion King starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. I'm not going to lie. I think this is a good swords and sandals type of film. It's fun. It's got a lot of great fantastical, mystical elements to it. And it's just a really enjoyable movie. It harkens back to those classic 80s and early 90s or 70s films. I think it's really done well. In the 4K, it's a nice upgrade. I think it has a really good visual style. HDR grading is fantastic on this one, and the audio is also something that's a lot of fun. 4K wise, this one sometimes can be a little hard to get. I just checked on Amazon. It is out of stock at the moment, but I like the movie. And as far as a fantasy, swords, and sorcery type of movie goes, I think it's absolutely worth owning. These next two movies are vastly different fantasy-wise, but what they have in common is director Ang Lee, and I'm talking about Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and Life of Pi. Beginning with Crouching Tiger, this movie is beautiful. It's beautiful, and it's got that international fantasy element to it. It's just a gorgeously shot. It's a mystical type of film, and it is timeless. Sony normally puts out really good 4K releases. I think they did a good job with this one. The standalone has HDR only, and the Dolby Vision included one as part of a collection release last year. But I think no matter which version you have, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon is a great international fantasy film, and I highly recommend you check it out. Now, Life of Pi, I love this one. I just watched this one again recently, maybe about a month or two ago, and it is still a gorgeous looking disc from the now defunct 20th Century Fox label. But I mean, they put out some 4K discs that are really good. I mean, visually, they're awesome. And if you've never seen Life of Pi, it is a reality-based movie with some fantastical storytelling elements. I'll just say it that, but it's wonderful. I mean, the HDR in this just pops. And audio-wise, it's great. It doesn't have Dolby Atmos. I believe it's only 7.1, but it is a phenomenal audio track. It's very immersive. But both of these movies on 4K, I highly recommend. And if you've never seen either one, do yourself a favor and pick up the 4Ks right now. And the last two fantasy movies that I think you should really check out and pick up on 4K, when you think of fantasy, of course, you think of movies that have to do with the King Arthur legend, or Arthurian legend, as they say it. Movies like Excalibur, which, once again, I hope we get a 4K of this. It would be phenomenal. But bring it up to date a little bit more into modern times, and you have Guy Ritchie's King Arthur, The Legend of the Sword, and I would say The Green Knight. Both vastly different King Arthur type of legends, but absolutely worth picking up on 4K. Going back to the Guy Ritchie film, it's a popcorn Guy Ritchie Arthur legend. It's got a lot of action. I mean, Jude Law is a great villain in it, but it has a giant snake. And if you don't think that the Atmos has some good use with that, check it out, because it is a fun movie at the end of the day. It doesn't take itself too seriously, and it's something worth, picking up on 4K. But for me, The Green Knight is clearly the more superior of the two movies. I love it because it's done by A24. So if you know that label, you know that it's got some serious cred to it, because it's a very entertaining, it's dark, but the 4K edition is top notch. It was one of my favorite 4K discs that it came out that year. And I think it's a beautifully made movie, and the 4K has HDR Dolby Vision, looks really good. And the Dolby Atmos is also something wonderfully utilized. I think both of these movies, once again, are very different, but fantasy is what they share in common, and I definitely think you should check these out. So that is my list of fantasy movies you should definitely own on 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray. I will leave direct Amazon links in the comments section below. If you use them, they really help out the channel. But now it's your turn. What fantasy movies on 4K would you recommend to the rest of us? Sound off in the comments. In the meantime, please like, subscribe, hit that bell notification. So until next time, this is Adam with Movie Guide 365. I will see you at the movies.